I am Jeanine Cosgrove-Albert, the Vice President with At Your Service Staffing, and we're continuing our summer series of industry innovators and influencers. Today we have the pleasure of interviewing Sunita Devi. Sunita has been with New York University, NYU, for almost 8 years now. Your time there has led you to your current position as Director of Events and Operations. And you not only work at NYU, but last year you obtained your master's degree from NYU in public relations and corporate communications. That's no small feat, working full time, I can tell you.
Yeah,
Exactly.
a little intense, just a little bit.
Exactly, but definitely something to be certainly proud of. And I thank you for joining us today, Sunita. We're obviously in the middle of very unique times in our world, and I wanted to get your perspective. I know you, professionally and personally, and we're both connected with SHFM, and we've been fortunate enough to provide some staff to NYU via Chartwells, and we, again, thank you for taking the time today to meet with us. But we wanted to first lead off with, how has your quarantine been? What have you been doing during this time?
You know, it's been awful, right? Like, we're hospitality associates and we're really about being hands-on. And, you know, NYU Campus Services has a really great motto, and it's, we're always ripping and running. We're always on the go. And now to not be, I think it's been a bit of a strange experience, not just for myself, but for most of the team. But we've definitely taken the time out to really start researching and relearning different areas of our industry, whether that is the staffing, right? You and I have had multiple conversations on that. Social distancing guidelines, what other venues are doing, what are the cities and states, what are they doing? So it's not just myself, but my entire group and the entire campus services has really been taking this time to learn about crisis, right? And to how can we navigate this crazy pandemic? And again, partnering with our vendors and seeing what they're doing, so that we can take that information back and communicate it with our students, staff, and faculty who also have a vested interest with what we're doing. So
no, for sure.
Yeah.
No, for sure. What has been one way that you and your team have been communicating with each other, during this time?
We've been Zooming it, right? Zoomed out. And but the funny thing is, I find myself having more one-on-one times with my team than when we're actually in the building together.
That's funny.
Because we're always being around, we're always tending to our clients. And finally, I have everyone in a room together and no one's looking at their phone to run off. And they've given me their undivided attention, which I've always wanted. But, we've been doing that. We've been also, G-chatting a lot. I think it's interesting to see how the team actually is reaching out more, right? And I think it's important to give them that attention, not just my team, but also the clients, just to give them that bit of reassurance, like, hey, we're working on a process, we're on it, we've got a handle on it, and we're in control. And I think, folks hearing that you're in control, I think it makes their anxiety so much less. So it's not even just my team, but everyone's throwing a Zoom call on my calendar, right? And all that's happening around just every industry, and especially definitely here in higher ed. So, yeah.
Yeah, nope. I know the Zoom well, WebEx, webinar, all of those platforms. I think we're so super connected with them now. And since we're connected with them now, do you think that there'll be a little bit of a trend, like, continuing with this?
Absolutely. And that's one thing that, we've gone back to the drawing board on as a team and said, hey, listen, virtual meetings are going to take over. I know everyone's like, hey, we're Zoomed out, but it costs less to do, right? And you have so much more access to speakers. People who are right now quarantining or have time on their hands, right? It cuts down on travel time. We're in New York City. So traveling from one building, which is, let's say, on 17th Street, all the way down to Washington Square Park, it's a good 20 minutes. So Zoom meetings is going to cut people's time down. I do feel like that might make an impact on, let's say, the events industry. For us, right, we're anticipating, hey, everyone's going to take a meeting that they normally would have about, let's say, 6 people. Now they're like, oh, okay, we're just going to do a Zoom meeting. And that's going to be interesting in the coming months in the fall semester when we go back on campus.
Yeah, now speaking of that, so, obviously you see the Zoom meeting for the smaller groups. Obviously NYU, huge school, campus spread out. You have not only students from the States, you have a big international student base as well. So how do you foresee classes? And dorm life? What are you all planning for?
Absolutely. I mean, it's been a very vigorous planning process. Multiple task groups that have been happening on campus, even as we speak. I just got a call this morning. Social distancing is going to be massive. Really, really following the city and state guidelines is going to be huge. So I'll take my building, right, the Kimmel Center for University Life. We hold about 17,000 events there a year. We have a space that can typically hold 400 people. That goes down to now only holding 80 people. So that's a massive difference, right? It's a massive difference in how students are going to be looking at their event programming, and also departments that are typically used to having, seminars or webinars, educational seminars in some of our spaces. Now, does it make sense for them to do something that has been drastically reduced? Right? We'll flip it over also to hybrid classrooms. What does that now look like, right? You're going to have only X amount of people to be in a classroom space, and we have such a large student body. That might even mean classroom times are changing as well. Sorry, kids, you got to go up at 8 o'clock in the morning and get on a Zoom call now, right? Whereas they've been typically used to just coming in when, so later in the morning. Night classes might be a big thing. Summer classes might be more intense now than they've ever been. So I think, from an academic standpoint, I know the university's really been looking at changing their format. And then from a venue standpoint, we've been looking at everything, right? Social distancing, catering, what that menu development looks like, what our vendors are doing to ensure the safety of not only their staff, but our staff when they come into our facilities. So, it's been a lot. It's been a lot. And we do anticipate most of our areas changing in how they look, where it pertains to how elevators now will be operated, signage, floor decals on the floor to showcase everybody, hey, listen, you have to stand here, you can't stand, it's too close. And I think it's going to take a while for people to get used to. I think, students have gone and NYU and their campuses look very different to when they'll be coming back, and how there's going to be so much more rules, should I say. So, yeah.
No, for sure. Now, going back and discussing events, Kimmel hosts there's just a ton of events at NYU, just massive amounts. And yes, your building, Kimmel, I know hosts so many as well. And then you have, the law school, the dental school, the medical school, Tisch. You had like across the board, you're definitely not at a shortage of events there at NYU. Now, how do you foresee, I guess, those operationally? I guess let's talk the fall, and then maybe we'll talk about a little bit more down the road. But let's start, I guess, with the fall.
Yeah, I think a lot of the buildings across NYU, and I'm sure in other higher educational institutes, will be really focusing on utilizing their space for classrooms. And I know that's something that NYU is definitely looking at. So what does that mean for a department that typically hosts their event with us every year? It might not be possible. So like I said earlier, there will be a massive reduction in the events that we do, and also the type of events that we do. Mm-hmm. We're very used to sit-down dinners, galas, fundraisers. what does that look like now, right? Because we have to look at the safety of our food service provider and a safe way to serve our food. We've mentioned before as well, buffets. And what do buffets look like, right? Will they go away? Will there be an extra expense to have attendance there? So it works out for one industry, but maybe not so much for another. But, you know, we're taking it slowly and we're doing a phase approach before just saying, okay, great, every event could just book as soon as you want. I think it's important not to do that, and to take our time and to really evaluate what's working and possibly what we really need to be focusing on. For events, there's a lot that we need to keep in mind. Everyone coming into an NYU building will be required to wear a mask, right? And so then what does that look like when you're trying to make sure someone's walking in with a mask on that they don't have it, right? Like, how can you be hospitable by saying, hey, you don't have a mask, you can't come into the event, right? It's got to be like, whoa, you really got to start strategizing how you're going to do that, and then the communications prior to that event. And then obviously, what does it look like with the quantity of events? Once an event's over and we have to go in there and clean that space and sanitize that space, right? We're going to have to make sure that we have a really large gap in between to enable it to be cleaned afterwards, so that the next set of clients that are coming in with the confidence that it's a spotless and clean space.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I've mentioned catering, right? We're working diligently with our catering service to ensure that, hey, yes, we might have reduced menu items, but how can we still make this a great experience for you?
Yeah.
And that's key. And it even goes down to the staffing agencies. I know, you know, we've worked with AYS in the past. What does that look like, and how are we communicating out their procedures so that if there is a staff member inside our venue space, that our clients aren't feeling any anxiety, like, you know, are they trained, are they not, you know, will they be wearing their mask, what are they doing, you know, that kind of thing. And lastly, my point is, I'm rambling a bit, but my last point here is community. How can we still make these events have a sense of community? Because really that's what higher ed events are, right? It's bringing students together and making sure that we're creating that community whilst we still have a face mask on, right? When you approach a student, right? And normally if your facial expressions say everything. And now you have a mask on, how can you still show hospitality and show warmth to a student or to a faculty member or to an administrator? I know, you know, I was reading that one of the hotels in Vegas that are opening up is they do a gesture with their hand on their heart just to, you know, because they can't show anything. So these are the things that we're researching, right? Like, how can we really still show that community and to show, hey, you're coming into this facility and you are welcome, without saying, hey, sorry, you're standing too close. Hey, you don't have a mask. We need to fix that. You know, there's a lot of, so I think that's where we're at right now, is trying to still make them feel welcome, but ensuring their safety too.
Yeah, it seems like there's so many restrictions, and in hospitality, it's a little bit the opposite. It's like, how can I make you more comfortable? What can I do? You know, oh, you know, yes, move closer to the guest next to you so we can properly, you know, French serve your meal, or so we can provide you with service. It's so not in our comfort zone as individuals who are in hospitality and hospitable individuals in general, that, you know, now we're going to have these restrictions. But how do you, like you're saying, share that warmth, share that community, you know, have that part? Because when you think of an event, you know, most events are, you know, to celebrate and to be together and to break bread and, you know, to bond and, again, create that community. But how do you do that now is, I think, a question that everyone across our industry is asking. And a big part of, you know, why we're doing this series, to see, you know, where everyone is headed in that direction. And, you know, so we could be prepared to properly be a strong vendor to our clients, and again, be prepared so your guests know that if they, you know, do have a staff member from our company, it is going to be fluid. It's going to be, you know, it's going to be comfortable. But it's so interesting because you brought up a point you know, guests, you know, kind of worried about people being trained and like how they serve, and if they're hospitable and have customer service. Now we're going to be so concerned about their temperature, their mask, you know, a little bit more focused on those. It's so interesting.
So there's so many additional things now that you have to think about, right? So in addition to the service, now you're also making sure that they are healthy and they're safe as well. Because again, I say this to everybody, hey, you know, we can say vendors need to have certain processes before they come into our facilities. But the vendors are going to be feeling the same way about the facility. What are they doing? What are their cleaning protocols, right? Are the staff and clients and the guests really doing their part to ensure safety at that event, right? Are they ensuring that social distancing? Are they wearing a mask? And what are their cleaning procedures like? So I think it's a two-way street to ensure that facilities and event planners are doing their part just as much as our vendors and business partners as well.
Yeah. So what advice would you give then to your clients, and I guess now, and conversely to your vendors, as we start to get back into it, you know, so we can connectively work together?
Right. I think that right now we have a really good, we have an advantage. We have time. And I think right now time is our advantage. We don't anticipate a mass of events that are coming our way, right? September 1st comes, I'm not anticipating a flood of events coming through because people are still unsure. So we still have time. And in that time, I really think that we need to be looking at our processes, what worked, what hasn't worked. And I think in these moments, we need to be really communicative with our teams and with our clients and with our stakeholders. So something that we're doing on campus right now is we're coming up with somewhat of an FAQ, a guideline, a workbook that, you know, if I was to calculate how many emails I get a day just asking the same questions, right, that something like this workbook could be an easy fix. And that's something that we're working on right now, right? Like an FAQ, room diagrams, and what new setups will look like. But I think it's definitely going to be, definitely for something like a staffing agency as well, is really what are you doing in your training processes? How are you training your staff? What should we expect? I think sometimes people are afraid of change, right? And they are a little resistant to it. And then you've got the other folks that are like, oh, it's not real. It's not really a pandemic. Oh yeah, whatever, right? That really expect us to go back to normal. And I've heard that. And I really want people to understand and to expect that things are going to be different. Right? We're still going to try and keep that hospitality and that warmth, but there will be differences. So expect that. And I think so. My advice is to get together a workbook of some sort and really communicate that in advance. And it's ever changing because, you know, the world is ever changing and the city and state guidelines are ever changing. So it should be a real-time working document. You know, doing something like this is fantastic. Right? You're really getting the stakeholders to the table to give their opinions and inputs. And listen, people might disagree with myself or the other wonderful panelists you had the other few weeks, right? But this is where our company is, and this is where we're going. And debate it with me and change my mind, because it might be a better way to what you're doing, or what you're doing might be a better way to what I'm doing. So things like this, I think I wish there was more of. In our industry, because I think it's really helpful. I've listened to the other two wonderful guests and I've learned a lot. I've been like, oh, I'm going to take that away. And I've even shared that with my own team for them to start getting their, you know, wheels turning and thinking differently rather than the box of NYU. Because the box of NYU is only a certain amount. We have to step outside of the box and see what other industries are doing. So hopefully I've answered that question, but I really think communication is going to be massive when we come back, or even in these moments. But connecting with the stakeholders I think is fantastic. It really showcases trust that, hey, you know what, everybody's learning in this. And then the worst thing you could do is act like you know what you're going to do, because nobody really knows at this point, right? You can only assume that that's what you're going to do, because things can change tomorrow.
No, that's the truth. I think we learned that things could change tomorrow straight away with this pandemic. And if someone does not take that from them, take that, that would blow my mind. But I agree with you. I do have to say, communication, getting on the same page, probably some of the best advice, that, I would take away from what you shared, because it is important. And no one does have the answer or the magical answer. But one thing you did mention was that things are going to be different.
Yes.
And, again, people not being comfortable with change. And that's something that I agree with you. It's going to be different for a bit. There's going to be change. But do you foresee our industry getting back to what it was like 2019? And if so, when? Crystal ball.
I do see it kind of going back to normal. I think people will always have their, precautions. You and I know we're huggers, right? Every time we see each other, like, Jeanine,
Yeah.
that's going to happen anytime soon for folks. I even do it with my clients, and it's a real, I've known them for so long, but I don't think that's coming back anytime soon. And I would like to say, it is a disadvantage to us, because it's such a moment where we connect with our clients. Yeah. Again, I think we said virtual digital meetings will really take over, and I don't see smaller events coming back to the field anytime soon. I want to make a point as well, Jeanine, that we really have to look at the economy and the pandemic and what that does to a business, whether it's a small business, whether it's a large institution like NYU, or anything across the board. Your CFO or your finance officer is going to be looking at that breakdown, right? And events quite possibly might be something that is really eyeballed. Food expense, event management. What are we doing? Is that an event that we truly need, right? Mm-hmm. Is that a mission-driven event, or is that just an event that we've just had because we've had the luxury of having? So I want us to be very open-minded to the fact that we might have events that no longer will happen in the coming future. I'll make an example. We have a wonderful, it's Pride Month, so happy Pride. Mm-hmm. We have a fantastic Pride Month that happens, right? And in this time, obviously, we've had to reschedule that. But will we be able to reschedule that into next year, or cancel and just do that? We don't know what's going to happen, and we have to plan ahead, especially with our finances. So I'm not sure whether, we'll be moving quickly as much as we want, right? I'd love to get back into the mix and start hosting again.
And hugging.
And hugging. Yeah, a hug. But I think that, it's going to take some time. A timeline on it. I'm really, I'm talking to some other industry leaders that, I've been fortunate to be friends with. And a lot of folks are saying, hey, summer 2021 is where we're anticipating to be semi-normal. And what does that mean, right? It means seated dinners, right? The restrictions on social distancing not being so intense. So I do feel like that's somewhat of a realistic timeline. Would I, at fall, I understand people wouldn't want to come back and, have this big old party, neither in spring, but I was hoping in spring. But again, we have to be realistic. We really do. And we really have to think about, are some of these events going to be dropped due to the lack of mission-driven objectives?
No, that's true. It's very, very true. I mean, I do think that people are going to really have to they're going to take a look. And the economy has definitely been hurt. And I think people are going to examine, like you said, do we have this event? Is it mission driven? Or do we have this event because it makes us feel good? And that's the end of it. But it will be interesting to see how we progress through the change, through the differences, through the communication of it all. I mean, I just think that this is such an opportunity for us as an industry to really speak with one another. Whereas, we're so used to moving a mile, like a mile a second, and especially in New York, we're so used to moving so quickly. I strongly feel that this is just such a good time for us to be like, okay, like, let's take it back to basics a little bit. prior to this, what was working, what wasn't working,
Right.
and of course now there's going to be changes occur, because of that, because of the pandemic rather, so it's to me a really good opportunity to really look at what we're doing. And that also brings me to asking you, what do you think has been your biggest learning during this time? What do you think has really struck you?
Great question. I think we're always trying to be in control as events people. We're always in control. We're always trying to do this. And with something like a pandemic, it's out of your control. There is elements that are out of your control. But something I learned, Jeanine, was my relationships are key. You and I have spoke about this numerous times over our friendship and over, our SHFM careers as well. Mm-hmm. Relationships are massive, right? It's really important for me, and I've said this to my team, to give someone who is my vendor, who I see as our events family, a heads up. And that's really important to us. Making sure that you are listening to what your vendors are doing, right? Let's say we already know 72, this is an example, right? 72-inch rounds are gonna go like hotcakes. We know we're gonna order them because of the social distancing, right? So why not give our vendors that heads up and be like, hey, come this area, we're gonna be really requested, so you might wanna think about your purchasing there. For us, it just gives us that time to really start bonding with our vendors and our business partners in a different way that we've always done it, right? Which has always been rush. Hey, we need 12 staff on this event and this day, and we can slow down and we can start thinking strategically together. And I think that's what we've been doing, is really thinking strategically, but not just for our departments, but for the university, but also for our business partners too. And we've been doing that drastically with our food service provider as well. And again, something like this, you and I have had multiple conversations. And for me, that's important, because in the time of us being down and out, let's say, where we've had to furlough people, we've had to lay off people and let people go, these people are human. So how can we strategically come together as industry leaders and think of ways where we can at least perk it up a little bit, right? It doesn't feel so drastic, right? Which for other people it has, because they're no longer in jobs. And we can be blessed to say that we are, but others haven't. So how can we take care of them? And I think that's been my biggest thing, is how can my reach be further than what it is as the director of operations and events at NYU?
No, I think that's great. And I also think that is a great place to end up, because we have covered it all, from communication to, to our, to what to expect, especially from your perspective with NYU. We touch upon our industry, as well as ending with what sums up hospitality. Relationships are key, and how can we help beyond our reach? I mean, that's the true calling of someone who's in hospitality. How can I help beyond my reach? So I will thank you so much, Sunita, for your time today. I really appreciate it.